Hello there. Welcome to our ICAN-ngr educational enlightenment series. Today, we examine the topic, what professional accountants should know on data privacy and protection, looking at the roles and responsibilities of controllers and professors. The transformational value of data in today's world cannot be overemphasized. The right to data privacy and protection is an internationally guaranteed right which enjoys protection universally. But the challenge of securing data privacy and/or protection is a segment that we are going to be looking at on this program because it's a worldwide phenomenon. And joining us in a question and answer segment within this program to in-depth knowledge of the subject, particularly from the Nigerian perspective within the international milieu, is a well-honed and established technocrat and trainer, Mcleish Otuedon, who by professional definition is a PhD, DBA, CPD, FCA, FCTI, CDPR, CAMS, CIRM. I will just stop there. He currently serves as the president and CEO of Lichton Consulting and Board Governance Limited, as well as a director in Lichton Center for Leadership and Governance. Leadership, Governance Thinking. That's what I think it's called. Governance Thinking Academy. Yeah. And that is located here in Lagos, Nigeria. Dr. Mcleish Otuedon is a researcher and has published several articles in international journals in the subject areas of leadership, corporate board governance, emotional intelligence, international marketing, compliance, AML/CFT, and data privacy. More to unveil on our esteemed guest very shortly. And also today, in the segments of our programs, we are going to be letting you a bit into tidbits of our diary of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. If you advance, of course, you want to stay put, stay connected, we will be back with you very shortly.
Are you ready for exponential results this year? Do you desire and seek to build economic value and wealth on a consistent basis? We're proud to introduce to you the 4th ICAN Malaysia International Conferences. The theme is Building Economic Resilience, Navigating Turbulent Times Through Digital Transformation. This year's conference has been put together to empower and equip participants with the needed shift for personal, professional and institutional transformation. The conference dates, the 16th to the 19th of May 2022. Venue, Adia Hotel Langkawi, Kedah, Malaysia. For further inquiries, please send a mail to chairman@ican-malaysia.org or info@ican-malaysia.org. You can also visit our website https://ican-malaysia.org to register for the conference now. You can also reach out to us through the following contact numbers currently being displayed on the screen. +60 1632064113, +62 8121572358, 60,176,197,280, +234 8033502768, +234 8067908190. We look forward to your registration and participation at the conference. If you're ready to start your registration and payment process, please contact one of our friendly coordinators or simply visit the website to complete your registration. The website is https://ican-malaysia.org. Thank you. We're looking forward to seeing and connecting with you in Malaysia.
You are welcome back. And please join me to welcome Dr. Mcleish Otuedon to ICAN-ngr. You are welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, sir, Mr. Fakunle. Appreciate your kind invite and your sweet words of introduction. Much appreciated.
Perhaps, Dr. Otuedon, I sounded too sweet, and you are calling me Fakunle instead of Fatunke, but that is understood. I dare say you are most welcome. You are most welcome to ICAN-ngr. And very quickly for us to frame this, just before we came on, I got a few buzz from some of our students, both home, ACCA, CPA from the US. And one of the things they told me is, don't assume. Don't assume. And so I'm not going to assume. And so it will help me to kind of frame this subject of what we professional accountants should know. And I want to add what businessmen should know, what friends and clients of professional accountants should know about data privacy and protection. And then looking at the roles and responsibility of controllers and processors by asking you, what is data privacy and what is data protection?
Thank you very much, Mr. Fasuke. Really appreciate your question. So it's just important to look at data privacy simply as, from time immemorial, what we want to do as individuals is to be able to decide to hold information, data relating to us, then and be able to give it to whosoever we desire at will. And so data privacy is the ability for you to keep your data when desired, the ability to selectively share that data based on your choice. That is data privacy.
Why?
Yes. So that while data protection really is the totality of what is expected of one, yourself, who owns the data, which is, we normally use the word data to mean any information that you as an individual, a natural person, can be used to identified or identifiable data. And so if that data that you yourself have and that you are holding, all you need to do to ensure in terms of the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of that data, and if you so elect or decide to give that data to someone else, what that person also does to also ensure that that data is protected in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that data is what data protection is all about. And so whereas data privacy is your own personal responsibility, which is your choice to either give your data out or not, and to decide who to give it to, data protection is both the responsibility of the owner of that data, which we normally refer to as the data subject, which is the person who owns the data, right? And the person that you have given that data. It might be a natural person or a corporation soul. So that is the difference.
Thank you very much. Corporation soul,
Yeah.
ability to be able to share, and then making sure that you look at yourself. Certainly, Dr. Otuedon, there must be one or two, I guess, difference between the two. What would be the
Yes.
difference between these two?
Okay. Thank you very much for that brilliant. I've kind of provide some highlights on that, but the difference is that privacy relates to you having that free will, that option, that authority to keep your data and decide who to give it to as a matter of choice, right? It's a matter of choice. However, data protection now is the totality of what is done to ensure that that data is protected, that when it gets to the person you have extended it to, the person ensures that it is protected, whether in terms of security, whether in terms of the fundamental principles. And I'm going to talk about those fundamental principles, whether in terms of the lawful basis of processing, whether in terms of the rights that even the data subject has.
Thank you for delineating that essential difference. Also, why should we protect data?
Okay. We need to protect data for so many reasons, but the key reason is that if you look at it over time, I mean, data has, this is not the first time that we talk about data, but with the advent of technology, the internet, and the what you call social media, it has become imperative that data is protected, because now we were told that that data is the new oil. And so you find out that when you have the right to own your data, and that is the whole thing about data protection phenomenon that came out with the advent of the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the EU law on data privacy that was enacted in 2016 and came into force on May 25, 2018, which is that the rightful owner of data should have the right to decide what should happen to that data, right? And so right now, it is important that when you give your data to someone, if the person wants to trade with your data, that one, your consent is obtained. And two, if you need to be compensated for it because data is the new oil, that you are adequately compensated for it. And so so the need to keep data right now is to ensure that one, it doesn't get into wrong hands. Two, that it is only used for the purpose for which it was given. And three, if there is any compensation with regard to that data, you should have it as the owner of the data.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I am led.
So it's very important for me to also talk about some of the fundamental principles that guide data, because that is because that is really the very foundation upon which there are three foundations upon which data privacy and protection is built. One is the fundamental principles. Number two is the lawful basis of processing. And number three is the right of the owner of the data, which we typically refer to as the data subject. So the number one principle is that data should be processed lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner. That is number one. So it's a fundamental principle. So whenever you are obtaining data from anyone, you must make sure that it is obtained lawfully. It is also obtained fairly and in a transparent manner, no deceit, right? Number two is that it must be collected for a specific purpose. That is what we call purpose limitation. It means that the data should only be used for the purpose for which it was collected. And if there is a secondary purpose for the usage of that data, then you need to obtain additional permission, or what we refer to generally as consent, to use the data for another purpose. The third principle is adequacy of that data in terms of also relevant and limited, and it should be limited. What that means is that there should be minimization of data collection. Don't collect data just for the sake of collection of data, right? And also, when you've collected data, make sure that there's an opportunity for the data to be updated. And if there's a need for the data subject to amend that data at any particular time, that opportunity is given, right? I think the next one is that that data should be accurate, and where necessary should be kept up to date. Then it should be retained for only a specific or a precise timeline, which is what we call retention limitation or storage limitation. And finally, the last principle is that there should be security of the data. And I said security here must talk about three things. We must talk about confidentiality. If you are giving data, let it be secured. So you must put some security around the data. Integrity, let the data be complete. And in terms of availability, when the person who gave you the data come for it, or those who have the authorized access to that data, when they come, they should be able to gain access to that data. That is, these are the fundamental, we call them the 6 fundamental principles. However, there is an overarching principle which also guides all these 6 principles, which is what? For each of these principles, there must be accountability. So you must be accountable in terms of the lawfulness, the fairness, and confidentiality of data. There must also be accountability in terms of minimization of data collection, accuracy of data collection, storage of data collection. You must be accountable. Security, you must be accountable, which is the person who has collected the data. And that person might be the controller, or which you call the data controller, or the data processor. Then there is what we call the lawful basis of processing. The lawful basis in Nigeria, in line with the Nigerian data protection regulation. So with the advent of, or the issuance, or the enactment of the general data protection regulation, the world was made to be awake to its responsibility with regard to data, because the GDPR, as it's known, has what they call extraterritorial reach. And so different countries began to look at their own system. And so Nigeria also woke up and issued what we call the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation in January 2019. And within that NDPR, which is the short for Nigeria Data Protection Regulation, there are 5 lawful bases of processing. Number 1 is consent of the data subject. In Nigeria, a lot of times, when we talk about consent, it's assumed as if consent is the only lawful basis. No, there are 4 other lawful bases. Number 2 is compliance with legal requirement. And so if there's a legal requirement, or there's a legal obligation for you to obtain data from a data subject, then you can rely on that legal requirement to do, or legal obligation to collect data. Another one is to meet contractual obligation, which is the 3rd one. The 4th is to also for the vital interest. And so if there is an accident on the way, and you see someone and you needed to reach out to the family of that person, you can pick the wallet of that person and look for any identity document. And that processing will be valid because it is for the vital interest of that data subject. And the last but not least is for what we call there's one we call the public interest, right? So, like for example, if the National Assembly, they are conducting any investigation, or they need to talk to anyone, they can come to you to request for the data of data subject, which is data of natural persons, and that will be a valid processing of that, because it is for the vital interest, right? In some other jurisdiction, there is one they call for the legitimate interest, which is not recognized in Nigeria under the NDPR, but they call it the legitimate interest of the controller, but that is not recognized. But what it means is that it is for the purpose of certain actions, and that the data controller need to put in place to ensure that, for example, CCTV is taking that it is for the legitimate interest of the controller. For example, if anybody steals anything, they will be able to apprehend that person. But it is not one of the lawful bases. So the 5 lawful bases are very critical, and those 6 fundamental principles and the overarching principle of accountability, they're also very important. The last one, which is the third layer in terms of the legs, is what we will call the rights of data subjects. So there are few rights of data subject. One of them is the right to be informed. It means that if your data is to be obtained, you need to be informed. There's another one, the right to access. Which means that at any time, I should have the right, if I have given you my data, I should have the right to be able to come back to you to say, I want to access my data that I've given to you. And you should not make it difficult for me to obtain that. In fact, the law, the NDPR says that it should not be more difficult to gain access than when you requested for it in the first place, right? There's also the right of erasure. But the right of erasure is not an absolute right. If I have obtained data based on consent and to meet contractual obligation, I should have the right for that data to be erased based on what you call the time limitation. You told me that you were going to keep that data. If it is for 5 years, at the expiration of 5 years, I should be able to come to you and say, please erase that data. There's also the right to portability, which means that if I have given you that data through electronic means, I should be able to request that you also port that data to another provider through the same electronic means without me paying a dime for it, right? Then I also have the right to object. If you want to collect my data, NDPR is saying, which is the Nigerian Data Protection, that I have the right to object. That is why if you have cookies on your website, if I say no, I don't want you to access I don't want to accept your cookies, then I don't want to accept it. So even in privacy notices, I must have the right. So you must, for every time you give me the right to access, to opt in, you must also give me the right to object to that. And I must have the right to also report any incident or breach or complaint to both the controller and the relevant authority. In Nigeria, you have the National Information Technology Development Agency, NIGDA, which is the relevant body that is the supervisory body for data protection in Nigeria. But a new one was just created about a month ago, which is about kicking off now, which is the Nigerian Data Protection Bureau. And so that is the foundation of data protection in terms of principles, lawful basis, and the rights of data subjects in Nigeria.
Super. Thank you very much for all those elucidations. And Dr. Otuedon, I'll just pull you back. I know you already mentioned issues surrounding controllers, data processors, and subjects. But I'd like to ask you specifically, who is a data subject?
Okay, so a data subject is an identified or identifiable natural person. What that means in simple terms is that any natural person that you can identify based on certain information or data. So, for example, my name is Mcleish Otuedon. So that is an identified information. So with that, you know that is Mcleish. My photo you are seeing now, right, is an identified data, right? But however, if a data is pseudonymized, what it means is that if you remove Mcleish Otuedon and put B representing Mcleish Otuedon, right? But Mr. Fatuke knows that my name as Mcleish Otuedon has been replaced by a B, but you know that B represents Mcleish, right? To some certain person, including yourself, but not to everyone. Then we say that data has been pseudonymized. And a pseudonymized data, though it's not an identified data, it's an identifiable data, because when you bring back my name to replace it, then you will be able to know that B actually represents Mcleish, which means that for a data subject is anyone that you can identify or that is identifiable through certain information or data.
Super. Thank you very much. And I'm thanking our online participants who are throwing in their questions. Lion Fred is asking, what is the relationship between data as described by you and information, which is generally believed to be the one output of data processed? I think that is Frederick. Well, what is the relation between the data as described by you and information, which is generally believed to be the output of data processed?
Okay, so I mean, the data itself, I mean, just from the basic is anything that you can use to identify someone is data, right? However,
Right.
from the perspective of data privacy, we normally talk about personal data, right? Which means any information, right? Processed information. And so when a data has been processed, right, then more often than not, it's referred to as information. So any information that can be used to directly or indirectly. When I mean directly now, as you can see me now, you know this is Mcleish. Indirectly, if my name is pseudonymized or data is pseudonymized, or you use encryption measures, then any data that pass through that process in terms of a data subject, which must be a natural person, is known as personal data, or which is the information relating to that data subject.
Fantastic.
But for a
Thank you.
data, it's just any identifiable, information, data of a data subject. So that
Okay.
is just the difference.
Okay. Talking generally, I suppose is greeting us and is thanking you for the great insight. He's a fan of data
You're
and all its
welcome.
issues, as well as financial and account information. His question worry is this: from the regulatory point of view, can we look at the issue of duplication of framework on the issue of data access, rights to information, retention, compatibility, use safety, etc., from the Data Protection and Privacy NITDA? The Data Protection Bureau, yes, which is just about now coming up, Protection Bureau, and that of the use of financial information as contained. Oh, I think it's all. I hope we're able to get a feel of what Mr. Bello is asking, Dr. Otuedon.
Yes. So, I mean, there are just a whole lot about, I mean, you can look at the issue of multiplicities of, first of all, even regulators, right? And
Yeah.
multiplicities of those that handle data in Nigeria. There are many of them. So you have NIPSI, right? You have road safety, you have immigration, you have NIGDA, you have now the Data Protection Bureau, Nigerian Data Protection Bureau, and all of them trying to provide a framework on the basis of which you have NCC. So there are a lot of them, right? But at the end of the day, there's supposed to be what you would call an overarching legislation, a law. And unfortunately, Nigeria is one of the few countries that has a data protection regulation that is not a law. So when you have something that is not a law, it means that it is within the whims and caprices of a specific regulator. And in that instance, then there can be duplicity, right? And so there is this Data Protection Act, that Data Protection Bill that has been sitting at the National Assembly. And our hope is that it is enacted, and then a body can be created by law. You can call it Data Protection Commission, Data Protection Bureau. But the challenge you have with just the pronouncement of the presidency or a creation of what we call a subsidiary legislation is that you begin to see duplication of regulatory bodies, right? But then you also have the issue of the NDPRO itself and some requirements there that you think that could not be better enhanced, right? And so our hope is that when the Data Protection Act is enacted, then we might have a comprehensive law on the basis of which data can really be regulated in Nigeria from a comparative basis as other jurisdictions like Kenya, Data Protection Act, Ghana, Data Protection Act, South Africa, the POPI, the UK, the Data Protection Act, the GDPR of the European Union. So comparative, because those are laws and they are sacrosanct, right? And so that is the expectation.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Otuedon. Okay, why is it so difficult for government to integrate data subjects in Nigeria to enhance security in the country? An interesting one from Dr. Asay.
No, I mean, the truth of the matter is that there are a lot of things that we do in Nigeria. Sometimes you really can't understand the reason why. So, first of all, you have what you would call the conflicts amongst regulators. And so some regulators tend to want to outsmart themselves. Sometimes they're kind of unhealthy competition among regulators. And so what you expect from a jurisdiction like ours is to ensure that there is a center where a lot of these items come together. For example, there was a time that the Data Protection Act, the Data Protection Bill was midwifed by NIGDA. But at another time, I saw another document, that an expression of interest that was coming out from NIMC for the same Data Protection Act. So the question is that why? So at the end of the day, that is why I said that if there is a law that is passed, become an act signed by the president, then it will put to rest any of the unhealthy rivalry amongst regulators that want to either play or do or smart, themselves. So, but at the end of the day, proper integration of data and ensuring that cybersecurity, information security measures are put in place, both at the public sector and the private sector. Because a lot of times in Nigeria, when we talk about data privacy, it seems as if it is only for the private sector. For example, a few days ago, when the manifest of the ill-fated train that was attacked by terrorists at Kaduna was released, about 300 and something names, to my greatest surprise, the names and the phone numbers of all the 300 and something persons were released to the public. The question is that a fundamental principle that I mentioned is what we call data minimization. So if you publish the names of those persons that were in the manifest without the numbers, what would have been the difference? Or if you have pseudonymized those phone numbers, for example, you can remove the 4 digits at the middle. I will still know if, for example, there's a person called Olatunji, maybe Dada in that, or Olatunji A in that, and I know an Olatunji A, and I know the person's number. I will go there. If I see the first 3 digits or 4 and look at the last, if it's the same, I will know. But that data would have been pseudonymized. So the question is that who released that manifest? Do they understand data privacy? Do they have even a data protection officer? Because the NDPRO mandates all public sector entities or agencies and parastatals to have mandatorily a data protection officer. Do they have? Then, when they gave that to the press, the newspaper house, the publisher, who published it? So the person, whether the Nigerian Railway Corporation, I don't know, who released the manifest, right? When it got to the newspaper, the publisher, does the publisher even understand data privacy? So why should multiple bodies, agencies, be publishing data to the world? So the public do not need the phone number of everyone there. You publish it because those that are close associates, relatives, and friends. And if I have a friend there, I should have the person's number. And so if I compare the number, it's pseudonymized, data, then I should be able. So that was a breach of data. That was, I mean, how do you manage that kind of security data breach where you are published 300 and something phone numbers to the public? And so what is the implication of that? So those are some of the real challenges that we face here. So at the end of the day, everyone must take data privacy seriously, including accountants who manage data on behalf of clients and who also encounter clients or who also request for data also on behalf of clients.
Yeah, you see, Dr. Otuedon, it comes down in my mind to knowledge, a discipline, and application. Now, you mentioned earlier, and I took notice that Ghana and some other West African countries have virtually moved from convention to law. Yeah. And our dear country, Nigeria, is reluctant. Is it because of lack of the knowledge to understand the importance, or there are some other unsavory reasons, including, mark my words here, including the fact that onto what reasons are being put? Because if you took the example of the ill-fated, attack by terrorists, you begin to wonder, first, multiple numbers are given. Is it because there's so much corruption? We're not going through the same line process. People are just hopping into the trade and what have you. And there are multiple agencies, like Dr. Saying just asked. Agency A manufactures its own data. Agency B manufactures its own data. Agency 3 manufactures its own data. And the publics are all corralled that you must spend some money to go put yourself through data. Will you consider this to be a failure of knowledge or a deliberate bypassing of the normal processes for some untoward ends, include terrorist attacks and stealing of public funds and the Commonwealth?
Thank you for that. Your brilliant synopsis. I mean, sometimes, I always default as an individual to, I don't know. I mean, a lot of times some people don't agree with me, but I always default to say that there's a whole lot of ignorance in Nigeria. I don't believe some of these things are deliberate, but I just believe that one of the things you don't find in Nigeria is that if you look at other jurisdictions, right, whether you are talking of corporate governance, whether you're talking of leadership, you're talking about risk management, you are talking about cybersecurity, they look for the subject matter expert or scholars who can really provide guidance. But in Nigeria, there's this tendency to just do things just for. So for me, the criticality of data, it's so germane that if you ask me, why is it taking a lot of time? Why is the Data Protection Act sitting in the National Assembly without it being passed? To be very frank, I don't know why, right? Then another thing is that we also don't understand that we talk of creating jobs. And my own philosophy is that a lot of the laws in Nigeria, we can use them to create millions of jobs. You don't need to, it's just activities. Use laws to create activities. NIDA did something that was simple. What did NIDA do? NIDA brought some level of ingenuity to the NDPRO. They created a group of entities called Data Protection Compliance Organization. Why? Because they know that a lot of the regulators in Nigeria, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the bench strength to really supervise the operators. In this instance, controllers and processors. So they created a middle kind of man, which is the Data Protection Organization. And what do? They were licensed. And Lichting, for example, Lichting Consulting and BoardGov, we are a licensed data protection organization. And what we do, we help NIDA to do what? To liaise with the processors and controllers in terms of implementation, in terms of document drafting, then in terms of data protection and privacy audit. And we, on behalf of the operator, we help to file this audit report to the what? The regulator. And so that was an issue. And what does that do? Today, you have about over 100 data protection compliance organizations who invariably they've employed persons. They do audit, they do consulting services, they do documentation drafting. That is what you need to use that now to create activity, and you've created jobs. That is how jobs are created in a system. Then another challenge with not having an act, a data protection act, is that you find out that, we have the states, the federal and local government. And so today, because you have a regulation, the states, a regulation, it's not a law. So it doesn't really carry the force of a law. So states can decide that, data protection, who is neither, they don't have any power to do that. So at the end of the day, you have states not really fully in support or fully, leading the way of, trying to galvanize entities within their jurisdiction or within their state to comply with what? With the Nigerian data protection regulation. So, but if you have a law, then it becomes an obligation irrespective of the state, local government, or FCT, anywhere you belong. So that is why it is very important that the National Assembly pass the Data Protection Act. And what it does, it also makes us, other jurisdictions, to take us seriously. Sometimes we put our head in the sand and play the ostrich. No, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Why? Because sometimes, the relevant authority will say, oh, it's a secondary legislation. It derived its power from the NIGDA Act of 2007. Just save me that. Enact the Data Protection Act.
Right? We need to do that. And one of the things that the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria has always put forward when it comes to issues like this is that with integrity and with the correctness of data, we've said that to government, and I hope public officers and policymakers are listening. Francis Chuku is asking a question. I would like to collapse it because she's talking about how the country can ensure accuracy of data collection, protection, considering the corruptive nature of Nigerians. And I collapsed it by also now asking, where does a chartered accountant come in with all these gaps that we've seen? Gaps in knowledge, gaps, okay, maybe it's not deliberate. How do we chartered accountants come in so that we can at least make the marked difference?
Thank you very much. I can see a question from my president. I know that we answered that question, but let me hold on a little bit. But before I talk about the role of the accounting profession or accountants, it's very important for me to talk about the concept of data controllers and data processors, right?
Yes.
So because that is what you may likely be as an accountant. So a data controller, in line with according to the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, it's anyone, natural person or an entity who by itself or jointly or collectively determines the means and the purpose of processing. So if you are the one that determines the purpose of processing any data, and you also determine the means of that processing. So for example, if I'm the one that will decide to say that ICAN-ngr, for example, to say, okay, we want to collect the data of all members of the institute. If it is ICAN that decides that, right? And it's ICAN that engages another person to help with that collection and provide the means for that collection, that means ICAN in that instance will be the data controller. So the person who determines whether collectively, individually, or jointly determines the purpose and the means of processing the data of a data subject, that person is a controller, right?
Right.
A data processor is the person who processes data on behalf of a data controller. And so if a data controller, for example, ICAN wants to collect the data of its members or collect data of potential students in terms of registration, and you engage a third party to, on your behalf, collect such data, but that in that third party, an source agent, is not the one that determines the purpose of that data, right? Or the means of processing, then that third party is known as a data processor. And so an accountant or a professional accountant can be either a controller or a processor, right? Then when you want to talk about how do we really come in now as a processor, an accountant, or the professional accountant as a controller or a processor, it can come in from the positive side and the negative side, right? So one of the things I found in data privacy, which I sometimes I don't know why accountants don't take advantages of a lot of the opportunities that abound in the environment, was the fact that the most patronized consulting opportunity in data privacy in Nigeria, based on the creation of data protection compliance organization, is the data privacy and protection audits.
Okay.
And when I look at the over 100 names in that list of DPCO, there are only two accounting professional practice firms. Just two out of about 100 and I don't know about 103 or more. Only two practicing firms. And that license is an omnibus license. What it means is that what I found in practice is that you see an IT consultant, because he has a data protection compliance organization's license, is now conducting audit. And when you see what is called the audit, it has nothing to do with audit, because you can't see the basis of audit. So for you to be able to conduct an audit, you need to either be an auditor, or you need to be an auditor one, and you need to understand data privacy and protection. And so I found out that most of the audits I've seen in the marketplace, they did not even qualify, in any criteria you use as an audit. So it means that people are just out there doing something that I don't understand. But what are the accountants, the practicing auditors? How come they never went for that license?
Super.
Yes, so that is
you call it license to operate, and
yes, data protection compliance organizations.
From the way I look at it, thanks for this expose, the knowledge there for us to go pick. And I'm sure my professional accountants are listening. They say, wide gap in there. And then I take it to the questions posed by Alaji Razak Ajayi. I want to quickly go to that, because time is not a friend. Talking about the opportunities, I think you have really
I've mentioned one.
So are there other, very quickly?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, if you can do audits,
yes,
and you can identify gaps, a lot of times you can also do the consulting aspect of it. And that is why most accounting practice, they also have consulting arms. And so you can do documentation drafting, right? You can do implementation. So all it just requires is that the accountant must always don't see accounting as just, I must just be a straight-jacketed accountant. So there are some adjunct discipline, like cybersecurity. I'm an FCA, but I have about 3 certifications in data privacy. I have certification in cybersecurity, right? I have certification in risk management. I have doctorate in corporate governance. So at the end of the day, these services, you will need them. And if you just have audit and you don't understand data privacy, because the entities that want to engage you, they don't just want a single item. So they want to know, in addition to privacy, the security aspect of it, of information, in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Then the cyber security aspect of it, in terms of the devices, right? And the content of those devices, the security of those devices, they also want to put it. Then what we call data privacy by design. They also, so if you don't, then it becomes a problem. So a lot of our consulting opportunities there, and I don't see why accountants should not take advantage of that. All you just need is get a privacy, cyber security, and information security certifications, and voila, you are good. Then voila, you are good.
Voila, Dr. Otuedon. Unfortunately, time is really not our friend, and I know Mr. Femi Idowu's question is also stated in there. But very quickly, as we try to round up, are there penalties for breach under the National Data Protection Regulation? And what should accountants do when there is a data breach? Very, very briefly.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. The issue of data breach in any data privacy law or regulation globally is taken seriously. From a Nigerian perspective, if you are a data controller, including accountant or professional accountant, or you are a processor, if you breach the data protection, so if you process up to 10,000 data subjects, then the penalty is about 2% of your gross revenue for the previous year, right? If it is less than 10,000 data subject that you process, is 1%. So it is 10,000. If it's 2% of your gross revenue, or 10 million, whichever is higher. Then if you process less than 10,000, it is 1% of your gross revenue for the last year, or 2 million, whichever is higher. But as professional accountants, we must also understand that if we are dealing on clients' data, we have the responsibility of, as we have the responsibility to collect data, we also ensure that every data we collect from our clients or on behalf of our clients, there's a specific purpose for that collection. We ensure that it is protected, right? Then use and disclose personal information. If you are to use and disclose personal information, you must also ensure that you disclose it based on consent, right? Then if you want to provide access to information, you must also ensure that you have all the lawful basis of what? Of doing that. Then you must safeguard the information that has been given to you. Then you must retain it for not more than necessary, which is the retention limitation or storage limitation. Your employee also, your employee, you must make sure that your employees' data, they are as secured as the data of your clients.
And I'm going to say something to you, Dr. Otuedon. Time usually is a challenge here. We're going to call you again because we cannot, within the time limit that we have, exhaust this. Could we have your closing comments in 2 seconds?
Thank you very much. And my closing comment is that I thank the president of the institute for the opportunity. And I also thank you also, Mr. Fatuke, for this great opportunity, for the great work you are doing, and under the leadership of our able president, right, on this matter, and the passion that you've shown. And my hope is that we are able to reach not only accountants, our professional colleagues, but go beyond the globe to be able to share some perspective, what I would call a scholarly and a global perspective on some of this matter. But it's more importantly, accountants should not always see just the narrow scope of the accounting profession, that they should try and see how they can take advantage of all the ancillary professions or activities around them.
It is precisely, Dr. Otuedon, it is precisely that the ICAN is now being rebranded. We're talking of the whole chapter, new chapters. And a lot of some of the things that you have said here, well taken, students and our practitioners, there is a wide range of opportunities that is to be available. I want to thank you very much for your participation. Thank our audience for their incisive questions. And when we're able to take all your questions. But rest assured, we are going to get Dr. Otuedon back get him unleashed to do more of that subject. And our next episode of ICAN-ngr is going to be on Thursday, April 7, 2022. Time remains 6 o'clock West African time, and it will be on all our ICAN social media channels. The topic will be board dynamics as a tool to improve board effectiveness. And guesting with us on that day will be Tomi Adepoju, FCA. She is the partner head of the internal audit, governance, risk and compliance services of KPMG Nigeria, has about 24 years experience in the provision of corporate governance, enterprise risk management, internal audit and regulatory compliance services. She has a degree in chemical engineering, now come into the profession of accountancy, and she is now a fully superb, complete professional. You do not want to miss it? I will ask you to ask somebody to tell somebody else to join you on Thursday, April 7, 2022. I'll leave you with this quotation. Privacy is something that we maintain for the good of ourselves and others. Secrecy we keep to separate ourselves from others, even those we love. Privacy is something that we maintain for the good of ourselves and others. Secrecy we keep to separate ourselves from others, even those we love. End of quote. That is attributable to Mary Alice Monroe. And so the sun sets on ICAN-ngr program for today to rise again on Thursday, April 7, 2002. You will be the change that you would like to see. And until then, I remain Akin Fatunke, your anchor, ICAN-ngr. Bye for now. Yeah.